Well, to go through the papers this morning, I'm delighted to be joined by Australia's former High Commissioner to the UK, the former Foreign Minister, Alexander Downer, who's now chair of the Policy Exchange think tank. Nice to see you this morning, Alexander. Thanks for joining me. I know we've been talking in the green room about these mad stories now about Penny Mordaunt being the answer to Tory prayers. Let's talk about the polling that appears in the Mail on Sunday, first of all, basically predicting electoral oblivion, wipeout, whatever word you want, an Armageddon for the Tories. Do you agree with that analysis, that Labour could be winning or on course to win a 250-seat or plus majority?
Yes, I must say, as I go around the country, that is the impression I get. But people aren't very enthusiastic about Labour, but they really want to punish the Tories.
Yes.
And these stories that we're reading about today, Tory MPs briefing the media about how they'd like to change the leader yet again, they're just suicide. Changing the leader in the first place, I can tell you from Australian experience,
yes,
is very damaging to a political party in government. Changing the leader twice, three times, changing yet again, it will be oblivion for the Conservative
Party. But then
Party.
You're a really experienced politician and you must have some sympathy with the crisis that the Tories find themselves in. They're looking at Rishi Sunak. He isn't moving the dial at all. We had the budget, which, I mean, I don't know, what was your reaction to the budget?
Well, there wasn't enough in it to interest or inspire the public. What the government has to do is develop much more of an overall agenda. So first of all, inspire people to think positively about the country in the future. That sounds just like rhetoric, but you need some of that rhetoric. That's what, by the way, Boris Johnson and Ronald Reagan and people like that were really good at.
Yeah.
Making people feel good about the greatness of their country. But secondly, having policies that look as though they're going to achieve that. So, you know, continuing with the if you like, Blairite agenda, rather than differentiating their product, aiming at net zero by 2050, spending billions and billions on renewable energy initiatives, forcing people into electric cars and so on, pushing up the price of energy. In the end, they're doing what Labour were doing. So you don't agree with the theory that it's a good idea to shoot some of Labour's foxes, for instance, by scrapping non-doms? No, I don't. And I think shooting Labour's foxes, as the expression goes, is a really bad idea because it looks as though Labour's already in government. Yes. I mean, the government is adopting the Labour Party's policies. I wouldn't do that. Also, I would fight the Labour Party's policies. No, that's right. Not embrace them. And doesn't the electorate then become inspired or encouraged to sort of think to themselves, well, why not to Keir Starmer? How much worse can it be? Well, exactly. The electorate will just think, well, it doesn't matter who you vote for, which is what they do think at the moment. They don't particularly fear Labour because Labour doesn't have an awful lot of policies to fear, and they're tired of the Tories, all this gossip about changing leaders. They have changed leaders all over the place on policies. I know you were a close observer of the coronation, and therefore you will have seen Penny Mordaunt's starring role. She did a marvellous job holding the sword. Does that make her a potential Prime Minister in your mind, Alexandra? I mean, she's the person that is being touted seemingly by the right. Now, there's an interesting story in the Sunday Telegraph about this, because the right are now galvanising around Penny Mordaunt, which is not a sentence I thought I would utter about 6 months ago. But then there's a suggestion in the Sunday Telegraph that actually they're only doing that and making her a stalking horse to try and draw the centre into calling for Rishi Sunak to go. So the right are wanting the people that supported Rishi, who were ready for Rishi, to now dump him. Yeah, so I think this will lead to a kind of 1993 Canadian election result where the Canadian Tories ended up with just 2 seats. Seriously? I think it would be utterly catastrophic for the Conservative Party yet again to change its leader. But then you're talking about a near extinction event. If you're saying that the Tories might be down to 2 seats. Well, the Canadian Tories were down to 2 seats. They might have 100 or 90 seats, but that's near extinction. And a lot of their traditional voters will just ship to Reform. Yes. I mean, I'd have to say MPs should spend their time thinking about policies that might inspire the public, and give advice to the Prime Minister and rally behind the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, not brief the media about how they're about yet again to dump the leader. This is absolutely suicidal.
I agree with the suicidal nature of it because it seems completely self-defeating. However, you'll have quite a lot of MPs saying we're trying to communicate with Downing Street and we can't get through. You've got Rishi Sunak sort of beavering away behind the scenes. He's not a good campaigner. He's very much keener on sort of the planning, the spreadsheets, the working out, you know, the tinkering behind. He's not a Boris Johnson figure, is he? And that's what the party's crying out for.
Well, they got rid of Boris Johnson, so they're not going to have another Boris Johnson figure. And Boris Johnson was a huge electoral winner.
Yeah. Do you think it was a mistake to get rid of him?
Well, of course it was a mistake because they should have. I mean, Boris, made a lot of mistakes, but they should have rallied behind him in the interests of the survival of the party. But they didn't choose to do that. They got rid of him. It doesn't matter. They got rid of him. They don't have another person like Boris to put in his place. They have Rishi, who's in the job. Their job is to rally behind him and to help him. Well, I don't know about their communications, but they need to communicate with him.
Unite or die, as Isaac Levido has been telling the party.
Unite or die, yeah.
How about the Farage factor, though? I note that he's back on the front page of the Sunday Express, hinting at the idea of a comeback. Obviously, he's working for this TV station. There's a suggestion that if he does come back, he's going to dive bomb into the electoral campaign, really, at the last minute. But can he do serious damage to the Conservatives, do you think?
Sure. I mean, I think he can, and he probably is already, because he, in the reform, has the potential to mop up a lot of those red wall Tory voters, and losing those voters, where are the Conservatives going to get their votes from? So it's potentially, with the first past the post electoral system, a major problem for the Conservatives. They managed to diminish the UKIP vote in 2015 and more recently in 2019 on the Brexit issue.
Yes.
But they don't have that card to play anymore for obvious reasons. So how they will diminish the reform vote, it's hard to see.
It's hard to tell.
They will do it with policies, but they have to come up with strong and very clear policies, not marginal policies. Is
their defence policy strong enough? The other big story of the weekend is this idea of us being in a proxy war, effectively, with Russia. We know about the GPS system on Grant Shapps' jet being blocked. Now we've got a story that he had to cancel a visit to Odessa because of the threat from a Russian missile. And meanwhile, on the front of the Sunday Telegraph, we've got a Latvian defence chief calling for conscription in the UK to try and see off the threat from Vladimir Putin. Your reaction to those stories?
Well, I don't think there's any need for conscription. I think that's way over the top. But you need to invest in defence technology rather than having tens of thousands of extra soldiers who are reluctant to be part of the army. Yeah, I mean, I do think the British government has done much better on defence than most European governments.
Yes.
So I think we should give credit where it's due.
Although, is that a low bar of comparison?
It is a low. No, it's true. It is a low bar. And still too much of the burden rests with the Americans, so the British government could do more, but they have done much better than most European, other than the East Europeans, the Poles and so on, but they have done much better than most Europeans, and they deserve quite a lot of credit for that. They've done a fantastic job on Ukraine. They have been really robust, simple, clear position in support of Ukraine. They've been very good on
Although
that.
Briefly, Alexander, no increase in defence spending in the budget?
No, well...
an error, do you think?
They have to get the money from somewhere. They spend so much money on green initiatives.
Yes.
That leaves them with so little else to spend on anything else.
Maybe there are more votes in the NHS than there are in defence spending.
Well, I mean, yes, but if you're always thinking about the votes and not the quality of government and the broad direction of the country, you're not going to get anywhere.
No, that's right.
And the NHS, they've had 14 years to improve the performance of the NHS, and all they've done is pump money into it. That is not going to be the ultimate solution.
Alexander Downer, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning.
It's a pleasure, Camilla.